My name is Laurie White. I'm the president of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, and I'm joined today by three of our state's leaders who are managing the situation with the Washington Bridge closure. I'd like to welcome Mayor Brett Smiley, Providence Mayor Brett Smiley, DOT Director Peter Alviti, as well as Commerce Secretary Liz Tanner. So over the course of the next 20 minutes or so, we will have an opportunity to understand what is happening on the ground here in Providence, and understanding that we have a business-based audience. We have small businesses that are impacted around the holiday season, whose businesses are around the Providence area that need to know in the short and the intermediate term what to expect. We also have a variety of employers and employees, and since we are a city state, if you will, this impacts all of us from a commuting perspective. What do employers need to know relative to thinking about new work from home policies or commuter policies, and also what employers need to know in order to continue to conduct business in our state. So with that, I am going to first call on Providence Mayor Brett Smiley to provide a perspective from the mayor's office. Mayor.
Thank you, Laurie. Good afternoon, everybody. And for everyone who's been personally impacted over the last, at this point now, 24 hours, I'm sorry it's been such a tough stretch, and we take this very seriously. We know that it's impacting businesses, it's impacting your employees, and it's impacting residents here, most acutely in Providence and in East Providence, but it's got spider webs throughout the region. So Director Alviti is going to speak shortly, and he can answer maybe some of the more technical questions, but I want to tell you briefly what we're doing in Providence.
There are more than 450 participants in the meeting. This meeting is being recorded. If
this is a good time to remind folks, if you're not muted, to please mute yourself. Darn it. I want to thank Peter. Nobody wants to have this impact, but hopefully we can all agree that any imminent risk to life and safety, we have to trust the engineers that this was the right thing to do. And as terrible as the last 24 hours have been, that we have seen bridge collapses around the country, and including in the recent months even, and that surely would be worse. And so when the director gave us a call, the city jumped into action immediately. The Providence Police have been and continue to be out along the detour route. So really from the bottom of the Henderson Bridge down Angel Street to Gano Street, which is the primary detour. And then some people are coming all the way down Angel, all the way into downtown. If you've traveled that route, you hopefully noticed a couple things. First, it's actually moving pretty well in Providence once you get off the bridge. That is largely because we have over 20 police officers out at most intersections along the detour. And so we have police from 6 a.m. until 11 p.m. pulling traffic through the intersections, keeping the cars moving, keeping traffic flowing. There was a little hiccup last night where cross traffic in Wayland Square was shut off. That problem has been solved. So now Wayland Square is open for business. It's a real concern of mine. That's one of our primary commercial districts. We're 2 weeks before Christmas. It's terrible that this is happening right before the holidays for them, but traffic is flowing through Wayland Square, and traffic in Providence is actually flowing pretty well once you get off the bridge. The city is committed to continuing that police coverage 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. Until the Washington Bridge is made bidirectional, which the director has said is about 2 weeks. So the folks who are trying to travel within Providence should have some confidence that we're moving pretty well in the city. The hard part is getting off the bridge. In addition to the police coverage, our Department of Public Works has been working closely with DOT. We've reprogrammed traffic lights so that the lights stay green longer along the detour routes. We actually disabled the light at the bottom of the Gano Street off-ramp because that's not necessary anymore. And so we've made the infrastructure changes. We put an emergency hold with the building department, the public works department, the water department. So there's going to be no construction happening along the route for any fear about that. And we've been working with our schools on the Providence side, again, to change some of the pickup and drop off locations to make sure that our kids can still get to school on time. We have not heard major impact to the Providence public schools. There are certainly some kids who rely on statewide transportation because they have an IEP or they go to a private school. If you're on a bus coming from East Providence or Barrington, that obviously has been a problem. And we know we have a lot of private school families whose kids go to the Wheeler School or Moses Brown, or who are Providence families who go to the Gordon School or PCD. Those families have been severely impacted, and those schools are making decisions about bell times and start times. I don't have all the details on where they're at, but we are taking those concerns seriously. What we're asking employers to do, and sadly, we all got real good at this during the pandemic, we're asking you to provide your employees some flexibility and to consider encouraging remote work, certainly for the next 2 weeks while the Washington Bridge changes are made so that we can go bi-directional on Washington Bridge. We're asking everyone to be patient and tolerant and to not forget that this is better than a bridge collapse. And I've been out door to door in Wayland Square, which is the primary commercial district that's impacted in Providence, offering assistance. And Liz Tanner, who's going to speak in a moment, is going to talk a little bit about what the SBA and Commerce might be able to make available if a declaration gets made. But it's a short call with a lot of people, so I'm going to stop there, turn it back to you, Laurie, unless there's other things you want me to touch on, and then you can hand it off to the next.
I'd like to note that I came into the downtown today around noontime, and it was a breeze. So the rest of downtown is readily accessible. So the financial district and the 195 areas, that area is pretty free and open. I didn't have any trouble at all, Mayor. So essentially, are you suggesting that that people shouldn't hesitate to come to the city, but it's that particular area that we need to get creative around?
Yes, and I actually did a couple interviews today because it's important for everyone else to know that I said, downtown Providence is open for business with no traffic. And I do think it's important to spread that message. I'm going to continue to do so. It's anybody coming westbound on 195, and if you have employees for whom that impacts, to give them some flexibility to maybe not come in would help. But for everyone else, it's business as usual. And other than the east side, and not even all of the east side, Wayland Square really is bearing the brunt of this in Providence, and East Providence is bearing actually probably a bigger burden from a traffic perspective. But everything else is free, open, clear, ready for business.
Yeah, and South Main Street as well.
Yeah.
What about emergency services, Mayor?
So on the Providence side, we haven't had any issues. There were some concerns around rescues from East Providence being able to get to Rhode Island Hospital, and Director Alviti and DOT acted quickly to allow for ambulances to be able to travel on the Washington Bridge westbound. And so that has resolved that issue. And so there should not be any concerns about public safety delays imperiling people's ability to get to the hospital, at least if you're in a rescue.
Okay, Mayor. So I hope you will stick with us.
Absolutely.
Next, I'd like to turn to DOT Director Peter Alviti. Director, thank you for being with us. I know this is an incredibly busy time for you. Thank you for always prioritizing the needs and concerns of the business community. What can you share with us at this time?
Thank you, Laurie. It's a pleasure to be on with you folks. You've always been great partners to DOT and everything that we do on the projects we've got going all over the place. I'm going to bring you, I'm not going to go back as far as what the origin of this problem is. Leave it to say that This is just one of many structurally deficient bridges that have been in our inventory for decades. During the last 7 years, we at DOT have rebuilt and reconstructed and renovated about 300 of them. We still have quite an inventory of deficient bridges left to continue to remake, and we're in the process of doing that. During the construction of a bridge that is adjacent to the one we're having this issue with, our folks, during the construction of that new bridge or new span, uncovered a portion of the deck that had one of the engineers on that project gain a glimpse of the adjacent structure, particularly a pin that is an anchor pin to a cantilever beam on the adjacent structure. The adjacent structure that is the problem where the fracture of the pin happened is a 1968 vintage bridge, which is in our inventory and would become a natural progression of projects as we make our way across the Seekonk River and renovate and reconstruct that entire bridge, all of the spans across the west direction. As is the case with many of those 300 that we've already done, and I'm sure is the case with some of the rest that are in our inventory, several hundred that are still in our inventory. Structurally deficient bridges, as they near the end of their useful life, can deteriorate very rapidly. There's a cascading effect that takes place that could cause a catastrophic failure very quickly. The young engineer that caught a glimpse of this fracture reported it to his superior. His superior had the presence of mind to bring in our DOT bridge engineers to take a further look. Our bridge engineers got together with a team of other engineers and over a couple of day period did a detailed inspection and analysis of the rest of that bridge structure that spans across the entire width of the westbound lanes going over the Seekonk River. They found that, in fact, there had been a cascade effect. There are 8 of these pins holding down the cantilever beams across the width of this older bridge, and of the 8 of them, 6 of them were fractured or in disrepair of one kind or another. They formulated an action plan, and by Monday morning, late morning, midday, I had a report on my desk with their recommendation. There was a unanimous recommendation of all of the structural engineers and the consultants that we brought on board that made it clear that the only option was closure of the bridge to traffic, that the bridge was in imminent danger of catastrophic failure, and that it was unsafe to keep traffic going over it. I made the decision to recommend to the governor what the engineers were recommending to me, and he took that recommendation. This is a serious recommendation, one that the engineering team that we had explored and exhausted all other avenues of potentially doing modifications or temporary repairs that would have left most of the lanes, if not all the lanes, open. There was no alternative that they could find that they would be comfortable doing that safely. So the recommendation was, and the governor agreed to have us move forward with the closure of the bridge. We did that yesterday afternoon, and the state police executed the closure very efficiently for us. During that time, we engaged the service of the design build team for the construction that we're doing on the adjacent structure to implement both a temporary and a permanent fix to this problem. We chose to do it that way rather than have something designed and then wait to put it out to bid and then have a separate contractor bid it. The design build team very quickly put together a construction approach and a schedule that will have 2 lanes in the westerly bound direction for a temporary period, utilize 2 of the eastbound lanes on 195. And we should have the necessary ramps and structures built and in place and open to traffic within 2 weeks. After that, and while that's happening, as a matter of fact, it's already beginning to happen, there are separate crews working in parallel to begin fixing the main structure that has the fractured pins on it. And that work is underway as we speak. The beauty of a design build approach is that while certain components are being designed, other aspects of construction like demolition and preparation could already begin without happening in a sequence. The expected time right now to complete those permanent repairs is 3 months. We expect that, excuse me, in the middle of all of this, I have bronchitis. We expect that that work will be done within 3 months. Now, we're not resting there. Our project management team here is designed in a way so that once a project like this is identified, the solution put in place, and the construction starts, even though construction has started, they're working with the design build team on a daily basis to see if additional resources or logistical changes can be made in order to save even more time. It's a very aggressive schedule, but we may be able to even shorten those periods of time to the temporary structure and to the permanent structure. And we'll be working on a daily basis to keep an eye on the things that we can do to speed that process up. I'm going to use a comparison that's been inaccurately used during the last couple of days as comparison to a bridge that did have a catastrophic failure in Pennsylvania a short time ago. For their temporary fix, what's taking us 2 weeks took them 10 weeks. And for the permanent fix, what's taking us 3 months will now take them over a year. They're not completed yet, and we'll be finished with ours long before they finish theirs. So I just wanted to say that so that you have a comparison of knowing the speed and accuracy at which our teams are working to get this thing opened, so that we don't have to inconvenience all of your lives and the people that work for you. In the meantime, safety is the most important issue here. The protection of life is the most important issue here. In that regard, it was critical for us to figure a way to get emergency service vehicles from the West Bay to the emergency hospitals here on the west side of the river. And our engineers did inspect and give clearance for use of at least one of the southerlymost lanes of the existing bridge that we had to close for the purpose of squad car, police squad car, and ambulance vehicles only. And we have put in place, and it is now open and operating, an emergency lane with a gauntlet of checkpoints that will be manned 24/7 to allow emergency vehicles to use the existing bridge structure that we have closed to get to to get from east to west. We have communicated this, the maps, the checkpoints, and the logistics to all 39 cities and towns, so that the emergency services and critical care can be delivered to the hospitals in a timely fashion and protect the lives of the people they're transporting. That is in place, it's in effect and operational as we speak. We are looking at other opportunities for providing alternate mode access from the West Bay to the East Bay. We have our transit folks here and our ferry folks here that run the Newport Ferry are in discussions with the ferry service provider that has a 200-seat ferry available that we're talking to Bristol to see what kind of infrastructure is available at the two ends to get people from Bristol to Providence, at least 250 at a time, and provide a bit of relief there. Our transit folks are working with the RIPTA folks to see if there are opportunities to provide special services to provide people with an alternate mode during this crisis also. Our efforts are laser focused on getting the temporary lanes open that will provide considerable relief, I think, to the congestion that's happening, particularly in East Providence. The mayor has done an extraordinary job. He and I are in touch all the time, as I am with Mayor De Silva, to streamline the paths and the routes that we're using temporarily to move all of this traffic through, and to coordinate the timing of street lights, traffic signals and police positioned in a way that moves the traffic through the detour routes to ultimately back on their destination on 195 West rather. The governor has an all hands on deck approach to this. He is plugged directly into this right now, pretty much full time. He's been coordinating things with the state police, the EMA, us here at DOT, and Commerce, and other agencies that we may bring in for additional resources from time to time. So it is a highly coordinated effort. Just before this call, a half hour before this call, I just got off the phone with the governor and our congressional delegation, and the senators and congressmen are all ready to put their shoulder into whatever available emergency relief funding or other resources that the federal government can give us. We had a lengthy discussion about that. The governor also communicated directly today with Secretary Buttigieg, Secretary of Transportation, to discuss this and open up an avenue for consideration of special funding that may be available for this. I will say this, not that funding is not an issue from the construction standpoint. I'll leave it to Secretary Tanner to talk about the commerce standpoint. Well, from a construction standpoint, we are using available resources that were identified temporarily for other projects to get this work done so that funding is not an issue in us completing this work as quickly as we possibly can and bringing all of the resources necessary to solve this problem. And we're doing that right now. Our project managers are doing an extraordinary job. I think this is one of those cases where there are parts of it that you could criticize and pick apart and say that there are areas that we could do better. But when you look at the total picture of what happened here, this is precisely how a DOT and a government agency should function. A problem was identified. It was immediately addressed. Protection of the public and safety of their lives was paramount in every action. It took the action swiftly and assuredly, and we're going forward and implementing a permanent fix to all of this very quickly. So that's where we are, that's where we're going, and I'll turn it back over to you folks.
Thank you, Director Alviti. Can you offer suggestions to those that are listening and will listen to this call about what each of us can do to mitigate the situation on the ground, particularly as we're seeing in the chat, real congestion concerns within the neighborhoods of East Providence, as well as the Wayland Square Business District. So what can we as business leaders do to help provide some relief to you?
Look, some of the discussions that we've had, and Liz can elaborate on this more professionally than I could, is the potential of work in place kinds of situations. If you have employees that for the time being temporarily could work from remote locations, then certainly having them do that and avoid having to be in their vehicle in this traffic in the first place would certainly be a benefit. Another is whatever operations and or deliveries that businesses are engaging in, if there is a way temporarily to move those into a time of day where there are lower traffic volumes, particularly at night, overnight, or evening hours, off-peak hours, so to speak. That would be a help from the business community. Any little bit, certainly any reduction, 1 or 2 vehicle reduction even, would go a long way at helping the congestion issues. We are just as little as a half hour ago, I had our project managers in touch with East Providence, where they have a more critical issue with manpower to provide some construction work details for the use in traffic control and getting traffic moving. The mayor's folks have done an excellent job on creating a gauntlet from the Henderson Bridge to the on-ramp to 195 that is moving traffic through there as good as it can be done. And I'm thankful for that.
Director, the mayor mentioned that traffic detail moving cars through the gauntlet was operational between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. Do you envision that becoming a 24-hour service?
No, I think we're keeping an eye on the traffic volumes, and our folks are currently modeling all of the various routes so that we can report out and measure as we tweak and try and make improvements to this, whether or not they're having a positive benefit. We'll be getting that information out to you all and to the public so that you can better judge your commute times through these various detours and make the decisions that you need to make in order to account for the additional time that it's going to take. But the off-peak hours and the nighttime hours, I expect, will be pretty free of the congestion that we see.
Before I move on to Secretary Tanner, I just want to circle back to Mayor Smiley. Mayor, anything that you would like to pose directly to Director Alviti? Anything you'd like to elaborate on?
There's nothing I need to. Peter and I have been in good conversation and in close contact. To your point around whether the traffic detail is necessary or not, we tried to be expansive in those hours, but they're not fixed. And so if it turns out that they need to expand, they will expand. And if a week and a half from now, people have changed their traffic habits and we can pare it back an hour, we'll pare it back an hour to save a little bit of money. So that is what we think is it actually provides some wiggle room. 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. is a pretty good window, but we will adjust as necessary. Myself, my DPW director, the police chief, we are all down there personally on foot a couple times a day to see it with our own eyes. And so all of this is evolutionary. And if we see a problem, we make an adjustment and we keep moving. So, and I would say the same, it can come from any of you. Most of you know how to reach me. If not, you certainly can be in touch with Laurie and she can relay the feedback to my office. We will make all adjustments that we can to make this less painful for everybody.
Thank you, Mayor. With that, I will invite Secretary of Commerce Liz Tanner into the discussion. Secretary Tanner, we had a session with you just an hour beforehand with other leaders from business groups, and you outlined for us the steps that Commerce is taking to establish a hotline and also a special website. So let me turn it to you to tell us a little bit more about that and how businesses that are directly impacted can hope to get some relief downstream.
Thank you very much, Laurie. Thank you for the opportunity to be on this call to speak to so many people. So I received notice about the same time everybody else did when my phone started making those noises, was immediately in touch with Director Alviti, the governor, and of course, Mayor Smiley and Mayor De Silva. And what we have done at Commerce is organize a team of people who are at the ready to assist both East Providence, and even Pawtucket. We're hearing about some businesses who are having problems. We have set up a helpline of 521-HELP. Businesses can also reach out to us electronically via commerceri.com. Doris Blanchard, who is on this call, she is leading our efforts. She's been our emergency services person for many years, and we'll be able to receive questions, inquiries, complaints from businesses. We have only heard from about 3 at this point, and mostly from businesses who have, today's their first day being affected by it. What we are encouraging business owners to do is to keep track of the loss of income in most cases, but in other areas, whatever it is that is hurting them, so that we can make sure that they receive the information on what programs will be available. We're doing that research now. We've been in touch with Mark Hayward at the SBA as well as some other programs, but this is not a disaster. So we have less opportunities to apply for any kind of funds, but we're working on what the possibilities would be. We hope to have those within the next few days. In order to even request any of these funds, we need to have at least 5 businesses who have been severely affected. So if you are one of those businesses or you know of those businesses, please have them reach out to us so that we can start to keep track of that information so that we can start to apply for those funds. We're also happy to have one-on-one conversations with particular, say, trade associations or chambers or organizations that involve businesses to have more deeper conversations. Since there are so many of you on this call, we'll talk more broadly, but if you'd like to have a more detailed conversation, we're happy to do so. We'll also be doing a social media push to get information out to businesses. One of the big questions that people are asking, and Laurie's noted, is what can I do as a business owner? If you can limit the amount of your employees or have a need to cross over the bridge, whether it's by letting them go virtual or rotating the days that they need to come in the office or changing their times, that is certainly recommended. There is no mandate from the state to do so. We know that our businesses have learned a lot during the pandemic, and we trust them to make the best decisions for their businesses. We also are making sure to get out the message: don't cancel your dinner reservations on either side of the bridge. Keep your dinner reservations, just give yourself a little bit of extra time. This is a problem going one direction, not necessarily both directions. And to remind everyone that particularly at this time of the year, that it's important to shop small and shop local. With that, I'll see if anybody has any questions, or Laurie, I'll hand it back to you.
Sure, Madam Secretary, thank you. Could you address trucking issues, main thoroughfare up and down the East Coast, and now trucks going, through neighborhoods, certainly delaying deliveries, but also, creating more congestion on small local streets. What are your thoughts relative to what our commercial haulers and carriers should be thinking about at this point? So far, the industries most highly affected is the trucking industry as well as the hospitality industry. I've spoken with Chris Maxwell from the Rhode Island Truckers Association. This kind of stuff happens to our truckers pretty regularly, so they're pretty smart about being able to get around. For the most part, they know which bridges can only handle so much weight and which ones can't. However, there will be enforcement on bridges, in particular the Mount Hope Bridge, which can't handle heavy trucks. There's lots of discussions about if this is going to be long-term, what are some accommodations that can be made, but we're just not there yet. One of the things that is being looked at is the ability for certain kinds of delivery vehicles, think home heating oil, to be able to deliver outside of the normal federally required times. And so there's conversation about trying to make accommodations for them to do deliveries at different times, but it's still early on for that. I think one thing I just want to point out, as an East Bay resident, I live in Bristol. I'm surprised how many people are still trying to go over the Henderson Bridge.
and how many of them aren't considering other routes via Pawtucket, via the Newport Bridge. I left my home at 9 o'clock this morning. It took me an hour and 15 minutes exactly to get to Providence via the Newport Bridge. It was a long ride, but it was not busy. The Newport Bridge was a little backed up, but not too bad. So I would like to encourage folks to try to look at routes besides the Henderson.
What about from a student perspective, colleges and universities?
So we do know, at least I've seen on Twitter, that East Providence will be going virtual, at least for tomorrow. I'm not sure how long that will last. And that so many of the local schools are looking at some virtual options. But I'm not the expert on that, so I wouldn't want to list out which schools are doing which. But it looks like the mayor might have some information there.
Mm-hmm. Director Alviti, getting back to the issue of the ferry, when would you think you would have some additional information to share on that? And is that a viable option in the winter? What are some of the circumstances or the caveats that you're looking at relative to the ferry, and where would it go?
Yep. So let me circle back for just a second on Secretary Tanner's suggestion that the Newport Bridge is a viable route. It seems that it's caught on. people are now on to you, and we seem to have quite a bit of traffic holding up, particularly in the westbound direction over the bridge. So it has become an issue there too. The traffic has become an issue even over the bridge. So be careful and account for the time. With regard to the ferry, we run a Providence to Newport ferry over the summer. We have been approached by a ferry company that has a 250-seat ferry. We created a stop in Bristol with a brand new city marina and docks there for weekends on that ferry route. And what is being looked at is a potential Bristol to Providence ferry run with our engineers and our transit folks are working on what the parking facilities at both ends of those would be, because it would most likely turn into a park and ride kind of a situation. And they're trying to vet the kinds of parking opportunities at both ends that are available in order to support that kind of commute, particularly parking in the Bristol side, since it would be mostly east to west travel. So we're looking that over. I'm hopeful that in the next day or so, they'll be able to come back to me with the data and a report on recommendations, whether or not that's feasible. And we'll certainly be getting the messaging on that, and on a daily basis, the timing issues with the construction that we're doing. So everybody is kept abreast of the progress that we're making in all of these areas.
Question about the bike path. Is the bike path still open? Is that an option?
The bike path is still open and an option.
Okay.
Laura, you had an earlier question about schools. So I see Russ Carey's on the call anyway, but Brown is in what they refer to as their reading week, which is like a precursor to exams and such. So students are starting to leave campus sort of naturally as they wrap up their work. And over the next week and a half, we'll empty out. RISD will be on a similar timeline, and Providence Public Schools have not had really any delays or impact. All of our buses have been able to get around the city. The issue is statewide transportation. So we have some students who get bused in from a different community because they have an IEP or some other need that's met through a school here. And then certainly some of the private school kids, particularly the families that are going back and forth between PCD and Gordon and Moses Brown and Wheeler. I mentioned that earlier. We know those are heavily impacted families, but Providence Public Schools have been able to operate smoothly. And the colleges, at least in Providence, seem to be doing fine. And those students are going to start to be going home kind of on a daily basis now.
The arcane language of government sort of provokes this question. Secretary Tanner, you said this is not a disaster. So in the language and the parlance of government, you know, different terms take on different meanings. which then trigger various actions, whether it be from a funding perspective or some kind of, government response and protocol. So could you perhaps parse the term, this is not a disaster, and maybe compare it with a state of emergency and how that might impact and truly influence the response to this?
So I should probably defer to my emergency management experts on the actual terminology, but because this was not like Philadelphia, this was not based on a car accident. This was not like a snowstorm or an event caused by nature. It changes and limits the amount of programs that we think we'll be able to look into, but we're looking to see what the possibilities are. We're actually reaching out to our colleagues in Philadelphia to ask what they were able to apply for, to see if we can apply for as all the programs they were, if we are limited. But it's just too early to tell at this point, but we'll intend to have more information to the business community as we move forward.
So we are 48 minutes into this. Let me recap as best I can, just very quickly, and then I'll call on each of our participants to say if they've learned anything in the last few minutes that we haven't covered. But I think the highlights would be that we expect to have temporary ramping up within 2 weeks. And in the meantime, there will be a gauntlet of traffic professionals who will be guiding within the streets between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. 7 days a week in order to keep the traffic flowing. The message to employers, if you can, keep your employees apprised and perhaps have more flexible scheduling in terms of working from home or at least working from off hours. Director Alviti, you've been in touch with Secretary Buttigieg's office about the federal delegation and hoping to get some additional funding or resources to accelerate the time period. And I think the point that you mentioned about catastrophic bridge failures and how there's a certain tipping point, if you will, and that when we have reached that, like we have reached it now, there is a quick cascading effect, which sort of, provokes the idea of, this is how this matter developed so quickly. And the young structural engineer who was brave enough to bring this issue to his superior and also to all of you. Mayor, you reinforced that Providence is in fact open for business and that you are confident that the city's personnel will be able to manage this. And that the couple of lanes have been on the southerly side opened up for emergency ambulance and rescue service, should that be needed. And Secretary Tanner, you mentioned 521 HELP, which is the helpline that Commerce has set up to work with businesses that are directly impacted by this. And you are encouraging those individuals that need some additional assistance to first and foremost, keep track of their experience and their losses so that later on it can be documented, and reinforcing that this is absolutely a dynamic situation and that each of you will be back within the next couple of days and offering greater perspective on things that we can all do as circumstances change and as the data changes. So with that, one last circle around, anything additional, Mayor Smiley, to bring forth at this time?
Nothing else to add. I would just say, like Liz, my constituent service line is simply 311, like dialing 911, but 311. If there's a City of Providence constituent service issue, just call 311. We've got a whole staff of people who can solve these problems. And so we're here to help.
Director Alviti.
No, that's about all I have to say. I'll be happy to take questions if you'd like.
Question about healthcare providers that's just been in the chat. Any provisions to get healthcare providers, whether it be physicians, nurse practitioners, nurses, dentists, to get to the hospitals or those institutions, police escort during shift changes, special accommodations, doctors, nurses, et cetera, anything specific to emergency health providers? Director, you still with us?
Hold on. Yep. So Department of Health is looking at these issues, and I'm going to leave it to them, their expertise, to explore what the potential solutions to those issues are.
Okay. Secretary Tanner, please take us out.
I'll say be mindful of the businesses that you already have reservations with. Don't give up on them at this time. They need you now more than ever. So again, keep your dinner reservations, shop small, shop local.
Okay. So I'd like to thank Mayor Smiley, Director Alviti, Secretary Tanner, and the 512 business leaders that participated in today's call, including our board chair, Dr. Megan Hughes, who has also joined us and is in listen mode. We will continue to keep these channels open. We've recorded this particular session and we will push it out in case each of you would like to move it on and send it along to anybody in your network. And we will certainly reconvene in the coming days should the need arise to continue to brief the business community and offer suggestions and what we can do as leaders to help the state get through this, this very, very challenging situation. So again, thank you for your efforts. Thank you for your professionalism, and we stand by ready to assist. So with that, I will thank everybody and call an end to this meeting.